Hey everyone, welcome to the AI Unveiled Weekend Recap. I'm Stefanie Waliuddin.
And I'm Asif Waliuddin, here to break down this week's biggest stories in tech and AI.
From a scrappy startup taking on the giants to Salesforce's billion-dollar cloud strategies, there's a lot to unpack. So grab a coffee, get comfy, and let's dive into what's shaping the future of technology.
The tech world just witnessed something remarkable. A startup called DeepSeek went from 0 to 30 million daily users in under a month, and they did it without taking a single dollar of outside funding.
That's fascinating, especially since most tech companies are practically begging for funding these days. How did they manage to pull that off?
Well, it's actually quite an interesting story. DeepSeek is essentially an offshoot of a Chinese quantitative hedge fund, high flyer capital management. They had the foresight to stockpile about 10,000 NVIDIA A100 chips before US export restrictions kicked in, which gave them a massive advantage.
So they basically bootstrapped their way to success using their parent company's resources. But now they're facing some tough decisions about their future, aren't they?
Exactly right. The incredible success of their AI chatbot has created this fascinating dilemma. They need more infrastructure to handle the growth, which means they might have to abandon their no outside funding stance. And we're talking about some serious players showing interest, Alibaba Group, and even Chinese state funds.
That reminds me of how Apple and Qualcomm's relationship evolved. Sometimes principles have to bend in the face of business realities, don't they?
Oh, speaking of Apple and Qualcomm, that's another incredible story of tech world drama. You know, between 2010 and 2016, Apple paid Qualcomm $23.3 billion, with $7.23 billion just in royalties. And get this, there was this incident where a Qualcomm executive spent a meeting looking at dog photos on his phone while Apple executives were trying to talk business.
That level of disrespect is almost hard to believe. How did that relationship get so toxic?
Well, it really came down to money and control. Apple was paying Qualcomm around $13 per phone in royalties, while other companies with similar patent portfolios were charging much less. Huawei, for example, only charges $2.50 per device. But here's where it gets really interesting. Apple is now developing its own modem called the C1 to break free from Qualcomm.
That's quite a strategic move, but I understand it's not quite matching Qualcomm's performance yet, right?
You're right about that. The C1 isn't as good as Qualcomm's modem and lacks some key features, but Apple has this fascinating roadmap. They're planning something called Ganymede for 2026, and then Prometheus in 2027, which they hope will finally surpass Qualcomm's performance.
It's remarkable how these tech rivalries drive innovation. And speaking of rivalries, what do you make of this Salesforce situation with Microsoft?
Now that's a perfect example of how business necessities can overcome personal animosity. Here's Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff, who's been publicly criticizing Microsoft's AI chatbot and accusing them of antitrust violations, now potentially striking a billion-dollar cloud deal with them.
The timing seems particularly significant, given the AI computing demands they're facing. How much are we talking about here?
Well, according to their president and chief engineering officer, Srini Talapragada, we're looking at a deal worth more than $1 billion over several years. And what's fascinating is that they're not just talking to Microsoft, they're in advanced negotiations with Google and Oracle too.
That's quite a shift from their current setup with AWS, isn't it?
Indeed it is, though they're keeping their AWS relationship intact. This is all about additional capacity, specifically for AI computing. It really shows how AI is forcing these companies to rethink their entire infrastructure strategies.
You know what's interesting about all these stories? They all seem to connect back to AI in some way. Whether it's DeepSeek's chatbot, Apple's chip strategy, or Salesforce's cloud need.
That's a brilliant observation. And it extends even further. Look at Field AI, this robotics startup that's potentially looking at a $2 billion valuation. They're developing AI models specifically for robots, and they're already generating millions in revenue by selling access to these specialized models.
How are they different from other AI robotics companies?
Well, what makes Field AI unique is that they're building their own multimodal large models, rather than just customizing existing ones from OpenAI or Anthropic. They're designing these models to work in chaotic environments like construction sites, not just controlled warehouse settings. And they've made them compatible with existing robots, which is huge for potential customers.
So we're seeing AI reshape everything from cloud computing to robotics to mobile phone. What do you think this means for the future of tech relations?
That's such a crucial question. I think we're entering an era where traditional rivalries and alliances are being completely redefined by AI's demands. Companies that were once bitter enemies are finding ways to work together, while others are racing to develop in-house capabilities to maintain independence.
And all of this is happening against the backdrop of increasing global tensions around technology.
Exactly right. Just look at how quickly DeepSeek's success turned into a political issue, with US lawmakers already moving to ban their app from government devices. It shows how technology, business, and geopolitics are becoming increasingly intertwined.
These developments are moving at an incredible pace. How do you think companies will manage to keep up?
I think we're going to see more of what we might call pragmatic partnerships. Companies setting aside their differences to tackle the massive technical challenges of AI. But at the same time, we'll probably see increased investment in developing independent capabilities, like Apple's modem project or Salesforce's multi-cloud strategy.
That makes sense. It's like they're hedging their bets, cooperating where necessary while building their own capabilities for the future.
And that's really the key takeaway from all these stories. The tech landscape is becoming too complex and demanding for any company to go it alone. Even giants like Apple and Salesforce are having to adapt their strategies and relationships to keep up with the pace of AI innovation.
That's a wrap on this week's AI Unveiled Weekend Recap. We hope you loved diving into these stories. Remember, the tech world moves fast, but staying curious keeps you ahead of the game.
So stay sharp, stay bold, and we'll catch you next time, right here on AI Unveiled.